What's going on, guys? It's Jono, and today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about JSON in make.com, what it is, how you can use it, and why it's going to be beneficial. Let's dive into it right now. So in front of me, I have the JSON module pulled up in make.com, and there's a lot of different things we can do here. We can aggregate data into JSON, we can convert JSON to XML, create JSON, parse JSON, and transform JSON. And we are going to be going all the way down all of these so that you understand exactly how to use it, with another bonus thrown in there, which personally saves me so much frickin' time. So if that's something you guys are interested in, let's dive into it right now. So before we get into what JSON is, I actually just want to show something that you don't even need to know anything about JSON just to actually use. And this one little loophole saves me so much time. And the reason for that is because when you're using make.com, one of the biggest pains is the fact that you have to get data from some source, right? So let's say I have a webhook set up here and I'm sending data from my CRM into make.com. If I want to reload that data every freaking time, I have to send that from the CRM. So I have to go into, in this case, go high level. I have to add them into a workflow. I have to check off test, enter them into the test workflow, come back here, run this once just to make sure I'm getting the data coming in. And oops, I'd have to change the trigger up here, run this once, and then come back in here, add that person into the workflow, and then come back into this just to get the information, right? And if you're having to do this every freaking time, it's obviously going to waste a lot of time, right? The amount of hours that I've wasted doing this is like, I lost track a long time ago, probably on day one of trying to get data outside of make.com. So what you can do as a nice workaround is you can see all of this data coming in, right? By clicking on this nice little one button here, and here's all the data. But we can come up to this download button and click download output for all bundles. And we can see all of the data that we just sent from the CRM. So instead of running this every time from the CRM to start this workflow, what we can do is we can just copy all of this data and we can come in to parse JSON. So we're going to add a module here, and it's going to be JSON parse JSON. And we're actually going to just dump all of that information in. We're going to unlink this and bring the trigger over here. Okay. And then once we have the trigger on this parse JSON module with all of the test data, all we have to do is click run once, and it's going to load up all of the data that we would have gotten from the CRM. Now, every single freaking time you want to run this scenario moving forward, you don't have to go back to your CRM. You don't have to go back to wherever that data is being collected from. All you have to do is click the run once, and it will run on that sample data over and over and over again. This is going to save so much time. So that is just one benefit of knowing how to use JSON in make.com, because it's going to allow you to use sample or test data to run your workflows. So that's just the start. Now let's get into what JSON is, because I think it's important to note what JSON actually is instead of just trying to understand how to use it, right? If you understand what it is, how it works, all that kind of stuff, you're going to be finding a lot more value in not only this video, but make.com in general. So typically speaking, with make.com, most of the data is going to be passed in something called JSON. And JSON is just a way to store and exchange data. Yes, I literally ChatGPT'd this because I couldn't find a concise answer online. It was all just drawn out and just rambled on and on and on. It was super vague and super confusing. So I just decided to ChatGPT this instead. But yeah, it's just a way to store and exchange data. And it's kind of like a mixture. If you look at the example down here, it looks like it's kind of plain text, but it's also code, and it's easy for both humans and computers to read. So that's pretty nice. Now, the basic structure of JSON is it has objects, which are denoted by key value pairs, and it also has arrays. So let's take a step back here and really understand what that is. So an object is just here. It's everything in between the curly braces. So think about like your typical business. Okay, let's say you run a landscaping business and you have 100 customers in your CRM, right? Every customer, maybe you have their name, you have their email, you have their phone number, and every single customer represents an object here. So you could be like customer one, their name is Alice, and maybe you have their age for whatever reason, their age is 25, and maybe you have additional information. But just in this example, you can literally categorize any information you want and store it in an object, right? Which is everything in between the curly braces. And then there's also arrays in here. And what an array is it's a programming way of saying list, right? So it's just a list of information. So hobbies could include 3 different hobbies. Maybe Alice likes to read. she likes to bike, and she likes coding, right? And at a very basic level, this is what an array is. It's a list of data, right? And all of these objects, you'll notice, are denoted by key value pairs. So what a key value pair is that you have a key, right? And this is how you identify what it is that you're looking for. So you want to figure out the name of somebody. So first name would be Alice. Then if there's another client in your CRM, maybe it's Bob, and then it's Richard, then it's John, and so on and so forth. And then every person can have another key, which is age, and the value would be 25 in this case, right? So there's always keys and values. Now, every single client in that CRM example might have a different name, but the key is always going to be the same, no matter which client it is. Every customer would have a first name. Every customer would have a last name. Every customer should have an email. Every customer should have a phone number, and so on and so forth. And there's 7 different types of data that you can actually include in a particular object. So there's string key. So there's text, right? So this is a string of text, right? Just when you're typing it in. Then there's numbers that you can include, like the number 42. Then there's Boolean true and Boolean false. This is just one data type, but it's just displaying it twice over here. So in Boolean, something can either be true or false. And those are the 2 different answers. It can be true or false. And then you have null, which just means like it's empty or there's no real value for that particular field. So for example, maybe you have somebody's age, but you don't actually know their age. You could just put null in there instead, and it's just not going to give you any age whatsoever. And then you can have an object, which is then nested within an object, right? So you can see that you have the first object here, and then you have a second object here. So this is why JSON can get really complicated, and it can also store such complicated data structures, is because it can keep getting nested below and below and below. So you have an object with different types of key value pairs nested within. So you can have, for example, text within an object. You can have numbers in an object. Any type, data type can be within objects. And then you can have, once again, an array, right? So this could be like a text array in the simplest form, which it's like text number 1, text number 2, text number 3, similar to the hobbies, reading, biking, and coding, right? So you can have text arrays, and then you can even have object arrays as well, which gets more and more complicated. But the basics of Make.com is actually arrays that have objects, and an array would be a list. For example, if we kind of bring it back to what we were talking about before, a list of different customers. So object 1 would be customer 1, object 2 would be customer 2, object 3 would be customer 3, all listed within an array so that we can use that information and go through each customer one by one. So that's essentially what it means to have JSON in Make.com. So now that we understand kind of at a basic level what JSON actually means, let's talk about how we can actually use JSON, right? So the first thing that we'd probably want to do is we'd probably want to create JSON. So right here, we had the CRM information. We parsed it over here. Let's just go ahead and we're going to add another module here. And what this is going to be is we're going to create JSON. Okay. And this is something that's actually pretty common in Make.com, is you're going to want to create a new data type or data structure so that you can use that data structure. And I'm first going to start off by showing you how to do this. And then I'm going to show you 2 examples that I personally use in my business and how I create JSON to great effect, right? And this saves me so much time every single day. So the first thing we're going to do is create, and you're going to want to add you're going to want to add a particular data structure, right? And there's 2 ways to go about doing this. You can either do it in a non-coding way, or you can do it in a coding way. So let's start off with the harder way, which is generating, right? So it's going to give you a box here, and you're going to have to enter in JSON. So quite simply, what we could do here is, if you have JSON already, you can just copy and paste it in. So let's kind of go back to this example here, and let's just copy in this example, and then we're going to just paste it in here and generate. Okay. And it's going to give us all of the values. And this is the non-coding interface where you can kind of just see all the values. So you can see the name, you can enter in a name, you can see the age, enter in the age, is a student, Boolean, true or false, and then hobbies, and so on and so forth. So we can click save. Okay. And it's going to generate all of this for us. Right. So at this point in time, what we could do just very simply is we could just enter in the name here. So we'll put in the name of the particular person. So let's just do full name here, and we'll add that in. And then let's just say age is 29, just because I don't have an age in this particular object here that we're referencing. And then is a student, we could just say yes, okay? And we can run this forward, and it's gonna generate us particular JSON, right? So here's the output that we have. So we have age equals 29, name equals Jono Catliff, hobbies equals blank, is a student is true, right? So we just generated that, right? And what we'd immediately want to do next in almost, or at least most of the cases that I've ever used JSON in make.com, is we want to have this information in a way that make.com can use that information for different parts of the workflow. So let's go ahead, and the next step is we need to parse that JSON. So JSON, we can parse it and automatically just pass in all the JSON that we just created, and then click OK, and we can run once. And this field here is getting the sample data. We passed in some sample data, such as the person's full name, and we created a new type of JSON here, right? One where we identified the age, we identified the name, we identified the hobbies, we identified if they're a student or not, and then we just parsed that JSON so that now we can use it for the rest of the workflow, right? So we can easily reference age of that person, or the name of the person, or the hobbies, or the whether they're a student or not, and so on and so forth, right? So anytime you're creating JSON, you're likely going to take it to the next step, which is parsing that JSON so that you can use it for any other part of the workflow. So let's kind of take a look at some examples that I use in my personal business. So I run a wedding company where we do 3 services: DJ, photography, and videography services for weddings, right? And some of the clients that we work with, they might have all 3 services, some might have 2, some might just have 1 of the services, right? But in this particular workflow in front of us, what's going on is we are taking a client after the event is completed, and we're creating an object in JSON, right? And what this object is doing is we're creating an object for every single different person that could be assigned to that event: a DJ, a primary photographer, a secondary photographer, primary videographer, secondary videographer. And we're just trying to do some accounting, right? How much are we paying them? We're breaking it down into all of these different categories, right? For any type of person that is assigned to that event: DJ, photographer, videographer, all that kind of stuff. And then we're entering that into a Google Sheet later on. And then we can kind of see, hey, here's what we're paying them. Here's the total fee. Here's the, here's upsells, what we're paying them for upsells or parking or travel or all that kind of stuff, total price, discount, all of that kind of stuff. So we're just kind of mapping or we're just creating JSON individually for every single person. And then for our accounting records, we're just pushing it into a Google Sheet so we can understand for any given event what we're paying every single one of the team members that we're working with. Another reason why we'd use JSON is, for example, to create line items. So we send out invoices automatically to our clients, right? Something like this. So essentially you would see all of the different line items broken down one after the next, and these are programmatically generated, meaning that I don't have to go in and I don't have to structure this, because this would take quite a while for me to do. And quite frankly, I think it's a waste of time if you can just automatically generate these line items. And how you'd go about doing that is essentially creating JSON here where you would add in a particular row. So you'd add in, first of all, a section here. So we just add in sections for the pricing table. So it's like DJ services, photography services, videography services. Those are the sections. And then we add particular line items underneath, right? For DJ service, travel fee, parking fee, all of that kind of stuff. And we add them in to create this beautiful invoice automatically that we send to clients, right? So that's just 2 of the ways that I personally use creating JSON and then also parsing JSON to create really sophisticated automations that end up saving me a ton of time every single day, right? So those are 2 of the reasons why you'd be using JSON. Now let's talk about some of the other reasons that you'd be using JSON as well. So another thing that you could do with JSON is you could also convert this to XML, right? So we're just going to come up here and we're going to say convert JSON to XML. So this is pretty rare. And to be honest with you guys, I've never used this and I probably never will use this. I think this is for the most part fluff and I don't really have a use case for it, but I'm just going to quickly run over this anyways. So you could literally just type in the JSON here and then it can convert that JSON into XML format. So for example, what we could do is we could just add in this JSON string here, right? So we're just passing in the raw JSON and then we're clicking OK and we're running once the scenario. And then instead of, and I'm just going to zoom in here, you can see that the JSON string we added in is like age equals 29 and name equals Jono Catliffe and hobbies equals this and his student equals this. Instead, we're kind of putting it in a markup or a markup language, essentially where we're reformatting it, kind of like HTML, where you have different elements that are kind of, wrapped around the value. So you could be like age equals 29 and name equals Jono Catliffe and hobbies equals whatever, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason I have never used this before is because this isn't HTML. HTML has clearly defined kind of like elements, like a P is a body paragraph and H1 is a header one, and so on and so forth. So in XML, these aren't defined, so you have to define them yourself and use that in your particular use case. But you can switch things over to XML. This is probably something that I will never use in my entire life, but that's just, another example of what you could do. Now let's talk about how you can transform data that's not originally in JSON format into JSON format. So for example, we have a table here, right? And we have first name, last name, age, and the country, right? And this is not JSON, this is, a Google Sheet. So how can we take this data and we can change this in a way so that we can use this data in a JSON format, right? And if I come back in here and I click the plus button here, I go into JSON, there's this nice little transform widget here, which transforms from one particular object to JSON. Now, I've never used this and I don't use this, but instead what I would do is do it in a background way, where instead what we do is we take the Google Sheet, right? And we aggregate all of that data. So I'm going to run through this module once just to kind of show you guys what this looks like. The first thing is we get a range of values, right? So we're just grabbing all the values in the sheet from A2 down to D4, right? So we're getting all of those ranges. And then once we collect that information, you can kind of see the output here. It's like output 1 is Jono Catliffe, 29 Canada, row 2. Bob Anderson is the second bundle, so on and so forth. We're aggregating that data, right? So we're taking all of that data that we just got and we're aggregating. And this is the secret sauce, is we have a source module, which happens to only be one because there's only one module before the aggregator. So we can only select one, but we're also creating a target structure type. And this target structure type is the JSON that we created in the next step. So in order for you to set this up, you'd have to run through this with the create JSON. So you'd have to create this data type first. So if we kind of edit this, and you can edit it in any way you want to, but I just gave up, I just have an array, which is a collection. And if you're wondering what a collection is, because we didn't define it before, a collection is just an object, right? It's just make.com's way of saying object. So they kind of they just word it slightly differently, but you can have an array of multiple objects, right? So an object would be Jono Catliffe, 29 in Canada. That would be object 1. Object 2 would be Bob Anderson, 35 US. And then the third object would be Chad Smith, 72 UK. So we have an array for every single person, right? So we have a list of different people. And then in every single collection for every person, we might have an ID, we might have their name, we might have their age, we might have we just put in that sample data for now. And then once we created that JSON type, then we referenced it in the target structure type. Okay. And once you reference in the target structure type, the individual fields that you created or the key value pairs will come down, right? So ID, name, age, and I just passed in the row number for the ID and the name for the name and the age for the age. And it's going to go through every single individual person, right? So in this case, it's Jono, then Bob, and then Chad. And it's going to aggregate all of those into one array with 3 different values, right? So you can see the 3 values here. I'm going to zoom in there. So Jono, Bob, and Chad, right? So, and then we just created it here. So we have the JSON string once again here, which is just taking this and transforming it into JSON. And then once again, I know this looks really complicated, but if you were just to parse this again, right, you just parse it down into the individual people one more time, which coincidentally is also exactly what you got here, right? So this is already parsed data, and then you're creating it into a JSON file, and then we're parsing it again. So the parse and the array aggregator are still returning the same values. And that's how you can really quickly transform data from like a Google Sheet all the way into a JSON file so that you can later use that JSON for other purposes that you may have later on in that particular scenario that you're building. The last thing that we're going to cover today is how you can aggregate JSON. So we have this parse JSON module here, which just has sample data with 2 particular clients with their first name, last name, full name, email, and phone number, and all that kind of stuff. And we're just taking this and we are compiling it into an aggregator, which is combining multiple bundles into one JSON file. So if we run this once, right, you'll see that we have 2 output bundles here and here, right? So we have as an output 2. But instead of having 2, maybe we don't want 2, right? Maybe we want to merge that into 1. And what we're doing is we're just creating one output here, which essentially is, it's very similar to creating JSON in the sense that you're creating a JSON file with these 2 objects together. And the objects denote the 2 different clients that we pulled in from the CRM, right? And then if we parse this again, we'll get back to the original result that we had when we started, which was this output right here, right? So when we talk about aggregating, creating, or parsing, we're just, in terms of aggregating and creating, we're just assembling JSON, and then parsing is disassembling that so that we can use it for the rest of the scenario. The one other cool thing about aggregation in JSON is very similar to creating. You can actually edit the data structure that you want, right? So you can have first name, you can have last name, full name, email, you can add, you can have tags down here, you can add more items, and once again, it can be any data type that you want: array, collection, data, or sorry, date, text, number, Boolean, binary I've never used before, but you can add in as many fields as you want. But let's say, for example, when you create this, you don't want all of the fields, right? Because there could be, for example, like 700 fields for every single client, just as an example. Well, you can use the aggregator and only define, let's say, 2 specific values that you want to pass on. So maybe, for example, here, if we come in and we edit this down, maybe we only want the first name, last name, and we're going to remove the full name, the email, and just keep the tags. We can go ahead and save that, right? And click OK. And when we go through this again and we aggregate the data and we're going to run it, we're only going to take those 3 values. And we'll go ahead and just run this again. It just ended up freezing on me. And now we've reduced it down to just the 3 values that we wanted to collect, right? So tags, last name, and first name. We removed the email and we also removed the full name, right? So you can chip away and only collect the information that you want and aggregate multiple different bundles together using the aggregate JSON module. So that is essentially it, guys. That's how you can use JSON in Make.com to really get the most out of things, right? You can create different data structures, you can create JSON, you can parse it into really complex workflows to help you automate a lot of the work that you're currently doing. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found value in this video. If you did, please make sure to give me the thumbs up down below. Also subscribe to this channel for more content just like this. And if you have any ideas on future videos, please leave it in the comments down below. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.